Hey, Joe, thanks for sending this along.
Yep.
Pre-recorded it.
Well, it's bond counsel, so you can miss a word. God.
Yeah. I'll say a couple of them a few times.
No doubt. Repetition's allowed, omission is not.
Right.
Yeah.
We good? Yeah, we're good to go. Who's back there? Okay,
Matt.
great. Thank you and good evening. I would like to call the Select Board meeting for Monday, September 9th, 2024 to order. And note that we will be entering into executive session and returning no sooner than 6 PM. Mr. Piekarski, may I get a motion?
Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation in the Jones et al. First Town of Harwich et al. 22-10753-JCB D Mass matters as the chair has declared that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the town.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Piekarski. Mr. Howell on his second. All in favor, Michael?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, 4-0, Joe.
Thank you.
See you all back around 6.
I've been trying for 4 days to get copies of, this thing on the scholar. You can't get it out of conservation. I mean, Amy's been away, kid that's in there, I went into the office, talked to this, and I said, well, do you have the emails? Yeah, and she said, yeah, this was this morning, right? Yeah. So, nothing, I sent an email to her requesting messages on the answering machines in the office. Just remember.
Call me.
Remember a day when you get direct.
Yeah, if you call me, I can, because I'm the liaison for that.
Yeah.
I've been keeping myself fairly informed.
Still working on deadline for it.
Right.
Was it something we said?
So,
Been up
let's
here
see
for
what
15
happens
minutes.
there.
Yep. You get my email?
Yeah, I did. I can't do it back.
Yeah, no hurry, obviously, but
Yeah,
I wanted you to have it.
yeah,
Pretty impressive.
yeah, yeah,
Approaching 800 now.
yeah, amazing.
Yeah, we got 3 more today, so it's still coming in.
Yeah. Well, where's the chair?
He's late.
They were downstairs for the last 15 minutes.
You want me to call it to order?
Yeah, and I'll make a motion that we adjourn and we can go home. It's been since 5:45. That's when I had the conversation that we could have done it in less than. What's he doing?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's okay, my time is worth listening.
Like being at the doctor's appointment. Nobody gives a shit about your time. The only thing you can get back is your time.
Don't look at me to give you mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. I'm just.
I'd rather die.
Well, you would be dying if I did. The Heimlich would stomp on your chest.
Well, won't let him forget this. He's late for his very first meeting.
Sure, it's important business.
We're not privy.
Well,
It's above our
tell me
pay.
something I don't know.
It's above our pay grade. Why would we want to know?
Why would I need to know?
Well, you guys see You never know what's going on. Right. It's tough to supervise somebody when you don't know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
This dream we recessed about 18 minutes ago.
Maybe need a little bathroom break.
I think I seen somebody down there when I was down there.
Because we got out of our executive session about 20 minutes ago.
I was like, I was in the bathroom before I came up here. I said, would it be funny if on the sun, well, I seen one guy that was in there, but no.
Yeah, could be. A little bit of nerves. Unleashing anxiety.
Come on up. You need somebody to talk about it. Where are you? See the feet up on the thing. It's okay.
See, if this was filming a TV sitcom, they'd have a warm-up comic here right now.
Go ahead.
Exactly.
No, no.
Get the crowd going. Yeah, exactly.
The applause sign behind us. And
God help us. God help
I had this dream that we had this endless meeting.
That was last week.
You're ready.
And whenever I'm falling, right before somebody hits me with a knife, I wake up.
Yeah.
In this instance, however, I didn't wake up.
Not bad. Late for your first meeting.
No, really. Is there anyone else coming?
Ready?
We've been ready.
Well, I've been ready for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good evening. I'd like to call the Select Board meeting for Monday, September 9th, 2024, back into open session. We started in executive session, and there was discussion with council, and the matter still continues. And I'd like to remind the public, as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping, as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chair prior to the start of the meeting. Hearing none, I'd like you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let's move right to public comment and announcements. Anybody here for public comment and announcement? Hi, Ginny.
Good evening. Ginny Hewitt from Brooks Free Library. Let's get the bad news over first. The rest of the meeting will go smoothly. When I was here a few weeks ago, I noted that the library was having trouble maintaining our schedule of open hours due to the low staffing levels. So I'm here tonight to inform you that, and the community, that the library will be temporarily closed on Mondays for the next few weeks. The rest of the week, the hours will remain unchanged. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday and Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we'll reopen the library just as soon as we get the staffing levels back up, and I'm very much looking forward to coming to make that announcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Kara Mooney, Director of Cultural Affairs. A couple summer updates that I wanted to provide you is that Seals and Stores did conclude with the merchants, and the merchants were able to raise $1,000 for the Children's Center, which was really exciting. All of the artists that were involved did donate all of their time and their work. So no one got paid for their work. They were doing it out of kindness, so $1,000 went right back to the Children's Center. Our summer concert series ended with Sarah Swain, which ended up at the building because of that atrocious Monday of storms. And it was absolutely wonderful. We had 100 people show out for her, so it was a great end to our summer series. So we're looking forward to 8 weeks next summer. We will sponsor more concerts in Brooks Park. And what's going on at the building coming up is we have a thread painting primer with Adele Scott this September, rug braiding classes, and CDP comes back for small business assistants starting on September 12th. They come to the building one time a month from 9 to 12, and that's offered to any small business. It doesn't have to necessarily be an artist or creative. That's just CDP's location. This is what they provide. We're starting a poetry writing group that's going to run from September 24th through December on Tuesdays. It can be drop-in, or people can register in advance. And then we're taking enrollment for several classes: art journal class, stitchology for kids, watercolor one-on-one private lessons, needle felting, painters group, jelly plate printing, and quilling. And then our first open house of the season is October 12th from 11 to 2, and we have a special mask making workshop in time for Halloween. It is the same day as merchants are offering Pirates in the Port. The Cultural District is going to spread gold through some of the stores that are partnering with us, and kids can find this gold. They can get a booty bag when they turn in their gold, and the booty bags we're stuffing at the Cultural Center with all of the artists, and we're really excited for it. So people can visit us online or 204assistant.com. So social media, everything is uploaded and ready to go for the fall. And we have a lot to offer come November, so I'll be back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment?
Good evening, Linda Sabula. It's not a public comment, but it is a question. In the prior iteration of the town website, a person could sign up and get agendas and minutes sent directly to their emails. And I haven't been receiving mine for a while. So just curious as to, has that stopped? Is it just an error? Am I supposed to sign up again? How am I supposed to get my stuff to keep myself informed as a good citizen? So that's my question. I'm hoping that, I know it's not on the agenda, but hopefully within a few days, somebody can get back to me and tell me if I'm supposed to go do something, which I don't know I'm supposed to go do.
Thank you very much, Linda. So Joe, do you want to answer to that now, or do you want to meet with me tomorrow and I can get back to Linda?
So I'm meeting with staff, IT director anyway. I'll bring this up. I'm hoping it wasn't a disconnect between the new website. It could be, so we'll find out what the answer is. I'll share it with the board and we can communicate it.
That's great. I'll get back to you on that, Linda. Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes,
if you would share that information with the whole board as soon as you
100%.
get it. I've had several complaints.
100%. Thank you, Michael.
Good evening, Board. Patrick Ott in East Harwich. I just want to reiterate that the Planning Board tomorrow evening at 6:30 will be holding a public hearing on Eastward Company's proposal for yet another 8-lot development on Route 39 at the intersection of Church Street. I'm asking that the public please present their views on their opinion of the eastward developments and the town character of Harwich and the natural resources that Harwich depends on. So again, I just want to reiterate asking for public opinion to be either, one, submitted via email to Christine Flynn, the director of the planning department, and or show up in person for their own comments at the planning board meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30, right here in the Griffin Room. All right? So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Terry Warner with the Historical Society, and I just wanted to let you know that we're having a decoy carving exhibit on Saturday, September 28th from 10 to 2. We have been having classes for the last several years on bird carving, and so everyone kind of like to show off what they've done. We also have our instructor and some other exhibitors or some other experts that'll be there doing some displays and actively carving, so that's what we're gonna have. Would
Thank
you
you,
like
Terry.
a sign?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment? Excellent. Let's move to the consent agenda, item A. And Mr. Piekarski, if you'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, vote to accept a gift in the amount of $5,000 from Joanne Kenny for the care and maintenance of the Millie O'Neill Rose Garden at the Harwich Community Center.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Discuss it first.
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Is there any discussion on this topic?
Carolyn, you know about the agreement? Just could you briefly let us know what it is so that the public gets to hear?
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, we were approached and sent the person directly over to the town administrator's office. She was a dear friend of the O'Neills and wanted to help in some way, so the best way we could think of was helping with the garden, which is beautiful when it flourishes. We're always looking for volunteers. Yeah, it's a very small line item in our budget. We have supplemented with as many volunteers as possible, but it is getting much harder to find those volunteers. So this would be a very, very wonderful gift that we would appreciate and put right towards the garden to have everyone enjoy its splendor, so.
Oz would be really happy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second, and now some more information. All in favor? Aye.
Again.
Again. 4-0, Joe. Twice, thank you. And now, Pete. Under new business, I'd like to move to item A, and if Mr. Piekarski would
Item A.
indulge us.
Item A, vote to authorize interim loan note and bond to be issued to the Mass Clean Water Trust for loan number CWP-23-19 and 19-A for Phase 3 sewer project. Mr. Chair, if I could, to the town administrator, sorry, this, I assume, came from council?
Correct. The packet that you have in your material is a document that starts out, vote of the select board. So what you have in front of you is the version to make the motion that supports the contents of the document itself. Everything in the document, after you read those 8 items, will be signed by all of you. And bond counsel expects that you would read it verbatim as they've written it.
Yeah, and as I told you, some words will be multiple times, but thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move, 1, that the town shall issue a bond or bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $41,921,965, known as the bonds pursuant to Chapter 29C and 44 of the general laws, and a vote of the town passed May 1, 2023, Article 21, and excluded from the tax limitations of Prop 2.5, so-called on May 16, 2023, Question 2, for planning and construction of sewers and other water pollutant control abatement infrastructure, known as the project. Item 2, that the terms of the financing agreement between the town and the Mass Clean Water Trust, the financing agreements, and the project regulatory agreements between the town and the Department of Environmental Protection of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the DEP, the project regulatory agreements, each relating to the notes and bonds, are hereby approved. Number 3, that in anticipation of the issuance of the bonds, the treasurer is authorized to issue an interim loan note or notes, from time to time in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $41,921,965. Number 4, that each bond or note shall be issued as a single registered security and sold to the trust at a price determined pursuant to the financing agreements. Number 5, that the treasurer is authorized to determine the date, the form, the maximum interest rate, and the principal maturity of each bond and note, and to execute a financing agreement with the trust with respect to the sale of the bonds and notes, such date, form, and maturities, and the specific interest rates or rates of the bonds and notes to be approved by a majority of the select board and the treasurer, and evidenced by their execution of the bonds or notes. Number 6, that any certificates or documents related to each bond and notes, collectively the documents, may be executed in several counterparts, each of which shall be regarded as an original, and all of which shall constitute one of the same document. Delivery of an executed counterpart of a signature page to a document by electronic mail in a PDF file or by other electronic transmission shall be as effective as delivery of a manually executed counterpart signature page to such document. And electronic signatures on any of the documents shall be deemed original signatures for the purpose of the documents, and all matters relating thereto having the same legal effect as original signatures. Number 7, that all action taken to date by the town and its officers and agents to carry out the project and its financing, including the execution of any loan, commitment, or agreement by the treasurer, are hereby ratified, approved, and confirmed. And number 8, that the treasurer and other appropriate town officials are each hereby authorized to take any and all actions necessary or convenient to carry out the provisions of this vote, including execution and delivery of the financing agreement and the project regulatory agreement related to the project.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, what was that second paragraph again?
Happy to read it to you.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Michael?
Joe, I think for future, we never got anything from council on this. And I don't think I've ever been anywhere, or done anything where I've gone to a bank and signed a note and not had a lawyer beside me that said that they had reviewed the document. So all we have is a fairly blank document here that you just said that town council created,
Bond counsel.
bond council
Yep.
created. Be comforting to me signing a $41 million document, that if we had some sort of review by council and they went over it with us.
So town council defers to bond counsel on borrowing notes.
Then maybe bond council should be going through this with us. Then secondarily, on number 2, of all the words that were just read by Pete, it says, project regulatory agreements between the town and the Department of Environmental Protection of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, DEP. The project regulatory agreements, each relating to the notes and bonds, are hereby approved. What am I approving? I haven't seen those documents.
So I do think you've seen the documents when the full borrowing, because this is the interim note to get to the full borrowing, was done. I was absent that evening. You had the assistant town administrator, you had the acting treasurer, and that was presented by them on this matter. If I could go build on this comment, but also the other comment, bond counsel directed the treasurer and I to get this to the select board as soon as practicable. So bond counsel created everything and directed us to get it to you for your execution, because it's an interim borrowing. All the other borrowing is done, but if you sign all of this tonight, it allows Eric and Ed and anyone else to start submitting for reimbursement on everything related to the Phase 3 project. So when it talks about the items in number 2, the project regulatory agreements, all of those documents have been shared in the past in some form, and it ties to the the State Revolving Fund questionnaire that was required to be submitted back in August.
Okay.
So what you're being asked to do tonight by bond counsel is read exactly those 8 statements. The clerk of the select board signs essentially a certification on the next page saying that he read it and you all voted it. And when I say you all voted it, that a majority of the board voted it.
Thank you. Can you email me those regulatory agreements? Or
Absolutely.
have them
Yeah,
emailed?
I can share with the entire board.
And it would be great to also get when we first approve them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? We have a motion and a second. No more discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm an aye. 4-0.
Thank you. So I would just ask you to take a moment and to go through. There are 2 sets of documents. There are 2 situations where Mr. Piekarski signs, and then 2 situations where all board members sign. And then tomorrow with the treasurer and the town clerk, they'll do their executions, and then we'll send it back to bond counsel to get the notes in place.
Thank you.
I was in one spot where I sign by myself.
Probably just the first one. The second page, thank you.
This is my $60 million pen. It's all yours.
That's your recommendation?
Sure. Yep.
So Jeff, I think there's only 3 here. There should be a 4th. Someone missed it.
Julie. Oh,
Julie would be number 5.
Julie would be 5.
Yeah.
So there's Dawn. You missed that one.
Well, maybe I don't agree with it.
Oh, okay. Well, then, I'm just counting. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jeff, sorry, you may just want to announce here what we're dealing with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just been brought to my attention that we do not have audio associated with the video. So we're going to take a recess right now, see if we can get that all worked out. And unfortunately, Pete,
I'm not rereading it. Motion to adjourn?
If I could,
unfortunately, Pete, we'll have Don read it. So, go
I've
ahead.
conferred with the finance director. We've both dealt with bond counsel before.
Okay.
It may be sufficient that you're in a public meeting, the audio kicked out, but we have certifications that the votes were taken, and we have several witnesses that can swear that the votes were
Create an
taken.
affidavit, all these folks will sign before they leave.
Otherwise, you should contemplate what your next step is, because the audio is not working.
Well, we'll wait until the, we'll wait a short moment here to see if we can get the audio up and running before we continue. As item B is, I think, pretty important.
Who knew that we would be doing the Harwich version of the meeting?
Very beginning?
Lessons, by the way. Big man around silent films and village teens. Interestingly, the audio is fine on Channel 8. According to the TV audience.
What did you say, Don?
Interestingly, I got someone out there from TV Land who texted me saying that the audio is fine on Channel 8.
So they may be saying they can't hear,
But they don't want to hear.
and if they can't, that's all right.
They could lip read your presentation. This,
I cannot have it read.
I think I just put people to sleep. That's the problem.
Broke the audio.
I'm sorry, what?
Channel 8, but not on live stream. So it will be recorded and for rebroadcast, so it's available.
So we can move forward. And Eric will be right back.
Okay.
Commercial break's over.
There's audio on the Google meeting, there's audio going to be on the recording for the meeting. So, and it might be a server issue back at the community center or with Comcast. So we can't really fix it on the fly. So we will have audio for the meeting, for this meeting.
For the recording. Thank you. Okay, folks. I now understand that the audio is just not working for the go-to meeting.
The
please.
live stream.
I'm sorry?
The live
stream. But it is being recorded, both with audio and video. So if anybody would like to watch with both audio and video, which some of you may or may not want to, you will be able to do that probably tomorrow after 10:30, as it usually is posted after around 10:30. So thank you for your patience. Moving on to item B. For me, this is just a way for us to wrap our arms around several financial questions, issues, concerns, and gain some more information regarding some pretty key things that'll be coming up for us in the future. So we've invited Eric Kinshirf here, and thank you for being here, Eric. We really appreciate it. It's nice to meet you and put a face to the name. And thank you again for all your hard work so far. So we have 1 through 6, and I'm going to leave it to Joe to kind of launch into this for us, if you don't mind, Joe. And, you know, starting with the closing of the fiscal year 2024 finances and timeline.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And it's good to have my colleague here tonight. Appreciate his presence and the work that he's been doing. As you know, you've named Eric Kinshirf as your interim finance director, town accountant. And Eric was the person helping us find Ed Spellman, who's our interim treasurer collector. So the topics that are listed here are topics that we've generated in conversation at board meetings, but also that Mr. Kinshirf and I thought it might be helpful for you to get some information on. Nothing more important than the closing of the fiscal year for 2024 as it relates to free cash under item 4. Mr. Chairman, I know you had mentioned potentially having a look at certain fees that the town charges. And of course, for us, any fee study means we're going to be looking at local receipts. I know there was questions about community preservation and funds available and reporting. So Mr. Kinshirf will be able to go through that. And I think really as we talk about those topics, it will impact upon the special town meeting if we have it later this fall. And then, of course, 6 is exactly that, if there was any other topics that came up. With that, Mr. Chairman, through you, I just turn it over to Mr. Kinshirf to walk through what I believe is his calendar on closing out the books for fiscal year 2024.
It'd be great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Eric.
Well, first of all, thank the board for the opportunity to work for the town of Harwich. I do have a little bit of experience with the Cape. Back in 1997, I was the treasurer collector for the town of Dennis from like 1997 to 2001. So basically, your finance department, the way it's currently constituted now, I'm telling you something you probably already know, but you know, the permanent treasurer collector's position is vacant. That's being filled in temporarily by Ed Spellman, and recently your finance director, town accountant position's been vacant, and that's been being filled by myself. So I just wanted to let the board know that you have 2 assistants that work for the town, Megan Green and Crystal, I hope I pronounced the last name right, Legendry, have been like, you know, fabulous to work with. I sat down with Megan, and we were going over some stuff as far as closing the books, and I just wanted to say, like, there's going to be a lot of work to do within the next month or so, but because of that, after talk with them, I'm just going to give you like a timeline with what I'm looking at for closing the books. So there's 3 dates that I have in mind that are a main focus right now. Is right now we are trying to reconcile the treasurer collector's books with that of the town accountant, and we're working on that. And we have a goal of by October 4th, 2024, those reconciliations will be done. So we're training with Crystal, we're working with Megan, some people from my staff are working on it. So that is what we want to do, because once the cash is reconciled, like we say in the accounting business, everything else is geography, but we want to get a handle on what the cash is. So once that's done, my plan is to submit for the free cash certification on October 18th, 2024 on my calendar, and that would give the town enough lead time I was told that you may be considering a special town meeting on November 25th. That should give plenty of time. You know, if you wanted to use free cash for that town meeting, it would be available by then. So that's kind of,
One second, if you don't mind, Eric. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get too far here,
yeah,
that's for fiscal '24.
correct.
So if there was an underassessment of free cash for '23, you're not looking at that at all right now?
No, I am not. And once free cash is certified for '23, you can't recertify a prior year. So, no, we're just looking at 24, absolutely.
And you would capture if there was any underassessment of '23 that would roll into free cash into '24?
Yes, that would come to play. Like, for instance, last year, let's just put it bluntly, last year you had like 2.9 million in free cash that was certified. The history of your free cash, it was way under what's been in the past, because I kind of looked it over. And this year, when I was looking at the free cash, and as accountant, we always try to hold our cards close to the vest. We don't like to go publicly with what we think it's going to be. But I can safely say that from what I've seen, like $5 million of free cash for FY24 is probably like a low watermark right now. And the reason I can say that right now is that your local receipts, when we looked at them quickly, they were about $2.5 million more than what was estimated. And then you have another $2 million in budgetary turnbacks. And there was also another $700,000 that was received for tax title payments. So that combination, makes me feel confident that you're going to have a healthy free cash when compared to what you had last year. It will probably be more comparable with what you've had in the past.
And there are two key dates that you just spoke about. I just want to pin down here before we get to even the possibility of a special
Yeah.
fall town meeting. When, just so everybody knows, you transmit your number to the state. The state
Correct.
either agrees with you and certifies it or doesn't. But when do you think you're going to be done? And what's the normal lead time for the state to take a look at that?
Okay, my work that we have to do should be done by October 18th, 2024, and that's when I'm gonna submit it. And what I usually do is I have the state's free cash checklist. I know what they check. So before I send it, I kinda do a little, sanity check on it. But the lead time for the state, I'd say probably, when I submit it, I have to tell them when this town meeting is scheduled so they can schedule accordingly. But usually within like 3 weeks or so, if I put on the form that you're not gonna have a scheduled town meeting, they may just put the submission in the back of the pile because they said, hey, we got tax rates to approve and so forth. So it's all usually driven by special town meeting. If you say you have a special town meeting on November 25th, they're gonna make extra effort to get it certified in time, unless I submit it like a week before town meeting or so forth. So, so your question was, how much lead time do I need? I should have everything that I need done by October 18th, so that's gonna give me 2 weeks after everything's all reconciled. We're doing things on parallel tracks, so these reconciliations are being done, and I'm working on the free cash right now, so that's not gonna be a problem.
So we'd call a town meeting without knowing whether we have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep,
That's all done? Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Eric, thank you.
okay. Then, let's see what we got here. So, the next thing on the agenda was, like the fee study, so obviously that's a good idea. But the big part of the local receipts, a lot of it is not driven by like fees that you set, because you got motor vehicle excise tax, you got the hotel motel tax. That was really healthy this year compared to what was estimated, and so forth. So the third item on the agenda was the Go ahead.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, through you. I believe the concept of analyzing fees came from a board member.
Yes.
Is that what folks were thinking?
I think at some point, it actually came from me. And at some point, I think town-wide, we need to take a good, strong look at all the fees that we're charging at all the different revenue streams that we have here in the town. And I'd rather begin to do that sooner rather than later, because if there's a change that needs to be made before town meeting, I think we should know what we're looking at.
And just to, Mr. Chairman, just to put that into some sort of context, I'm looking at the tax rate recap sheet for the town of Harwich. You can get this online. And, there's motor vehicle excise, meals tax, and so forth. But there's two categories that probably could use a deeper dive. One is called other departmental revenue, and it was estimated at 1.9 million. So I'm not sure what the breakout there is. It might be fees from different departments. Did there have to be a deep dive into that? And then there's another section of this recap called other charges and services. So I do think it would be healthy to take a deep dive and to find out exactly what these local receipts are, what drives them, and so forth. So I think that is a good idea. And, that'll help you as you go into FY '26 budget season, which is coming up. So,
Well, I would also like to look for board member input on whether the dump, for example, fees for the dump, and other departments that we think might need to take a stronger look at. Obviously, these two jump out a significant amount of money. We don't know how the breakout looks, so those two for sure. But
Yep.
does the board have any opinion or any input on departments that they'd like to see? Okay. Michael?
I'd go back to the dump. We had an audit done of the dump. An audit report was given to us. There was some, I don't want to call them issues, but there was house accounts that were in there. There was voids that were talked about. We had a presentation. We managed to raise commercial MSW and commercial solid waste, but that's the only decision we ever made. The audit was driven by, I had asked what would the dump look like if it was just our dump and we weren't bringing in trash from Provincetown to Yarmouth. We managed to make two changes, and I think that sooner rather than later, we need to look at what revenue changes happened from those decisions, and how those local receipts look now versus before we raised those rates. But I would also like to get back to the conversation and get some recommendations from the DPW director and the town administration on what the dump would look like if it was just our dump. And we were focused on that and not continuing to build our fleet of trucks to haul stuff off Caden for other towns.
so.
So the dump for me, just to wrap it up, the dump for me, but more importantly, going back to the audit that was already done with some of the things that were found in the audit that, in my mind, we have never addressed.
Mhm. So, I mean, all good points, and just to put some numbers on the context, like what, you're talking about the, solid waste fees, I mean, estimates are like 3.8 million, so we're not talking a small amount of money. And, the other charges for services were 228,000, and then the other department revenue is like 1.9, so that's a significant amount of money, so I think it would be, it would be a good idea to really dig into those, do some analytics and so forth. So if I'm still here, I could help with that after we get the free cash and so forth done. Like, just to let you know, like, what I'm thinking about is, like, my main focus is just closing the books, getting that free cash certified. And then I could look at something like this. And then the other thing on my plate is, I've talked to the board about before, is like the tax title and stuff too. I want to like refocus on that and get that stuff in. So, all good ideas. It's a good like initial discussion, and thank you for all your input as far as that goes. So.
I think that's a great idea. You stay on track with exactly what you're working on, and after that's all done, maybe in mid-November or later November, we can have a discussion about the other department revenues and other charges and services, because that is a substantial amount of money, and I think we should know where it comes from.
No, absolutely. And, no, it's, and hopefully, you know, I just put a post out on LinkedIn about this job. I said, amazing opportunity in the town of Harwich. I think I put a picture of the harbor, you know, out there. So hopefully, you'll have somebody here.
Ready to get out of here, Eric? Is that?
No, I am not. I actually love it, you know.
No doctor, but that sounded like where we were going.
No, but
Okay.
no, it's good. But my job is to work myself out of a job.
Right.
That's how, it's funny, that's how it works.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Don, sorry?
Before you move on, this seemingly simple sentence has vast implications. We have been hit and miss establishing different fees in different places, whether they're departments or Rec and Youth Commission, Kara's building, some of which have commitments associated with them. Board of Health, they statutorily set their own fees. So we really, in order to prepare for any kind of discussion like this, innocent though it looks, you'd have to put together a matrix about, you know, who it is that's responsible for developing those fees, when the last time was that we reviewed those fees, and whether we have jurisdiction over those fees.
100%, plenty of work. It's like a buffet of work that can be done, but you're exactly.
Well, I just wanted the chair to hear this because we
Absolutely.
need that as a starting point. I don't know where we're going.
Absolutely.
Yep. So we'll put it back in late November to revisit.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I think in an effort to hone in or focus in on certain areas, and I know Eric mentioned 2 different line items, but the information's available. I'd really appreciate kind of a breakdown that currently exists to help us formulate where we want to look. So as Michael said, he wants to take a look at the transfer station. I'm not opposed to that, but there's probably some other areas that, I guess another way to say it, I don't know what I don't know. So I'd rather see some detail, and then we can get into ownership and whatnot, but at least we can identify areas to pursue. And again, the information already exists, so it's a data download somewhere, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely, and to that end, your assistant town accountant, we were talking about this today, because we're starting to put together the actuals for FY24. She has like a template, she said, that she's gonna start putting together those numbers so we can compare last year's estimates with the actuals, so we could share that with the board through your town administrator, if that's the protocol or whatever. But yeah, just so you can, you know, instead of having just like 1 or 2 numbers, you'll have all the detail behind it. It might pique a question or.
That'd be my preference.
Yeah.
That's great, and I think that's actually part of goals and objectives, to get monthly routine financials, so.
Okay.
Yeah. I definitely don't want to have you stray off of task, though.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm good at that. Like,
Okay.
I'm tunnel vision till this
Excellent.
gets done.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're now on to community preservation, I believe?
Yes, your town administrator, when I came in, like, the first time I was on site as interim finance director, he said, you know, there were some questions about the community preservation committee. So your assistant town accountant and I prepared the year-end report, like, ahead of time, and we did send it to the chairman of the committee. So I just wanted to let you know that we do have the Community Preservation Act numbers as of June 30th, 2024. And just as in a nutshell, we basically, the way it breaks down is, there's a total of $6.6 million in community preservation fund balance. Of that, 1.7 million is for existing projects. So those are projects that are already ongoing. Then you have the various buckets. There's like 283,000 in open space, 1,902 in historic resources, and 107,000 in community housing. And then you have like 4.5 million that can be appropriated for any CPC purpose. So that's the stake in the ground, the way I see it, of what we have for CPC. If somebody else has any records or whatever that kind of differ from that, that was my whole purpose of it, because I was told there was like a little bit of controversy in the communications, or there was something, but I figured, this is it, this is the report, this is what we have, and I just wanted to communicate that to the board.
Board have any input? Michael?
So, Eric, thank you. Confusion, I think, would be an understatement. So, We've looked at, through CPC and listening to CPC and their committee and having meetings. We had a meeting with the current chair, not tonight's current chair, but Julie Kavanaugh, town administrator. I sat in on that meeting, and it was decided that Julie was going to speak to Finance Division. I was going to speak to CPC. We were going to gather notes and see where this thing went wrong, if it went wrong. Those meetings didn't happen because Finance Director left. So there still is some confusion with CPC, and there's definitely confusion with me because I'm listening to statements like CPC committee under 3 finance directors ago, Carol Coppola. They were very comfortable with her numbers. When Carol left to go to the county, Anne Marie started. Anne Marie found what she thought to be a discrepancy in Carol's number and changed it. And then when we got the most recent finance director, apparently she might have more agreed with Carol Coppola's, but found something else, and she changed that. So I'm not convinced unless you're sitting here telling me that these are the numbers, that these are the numbers.
No, these are the numbers that we have on the books.
Thank you.
I wanted to put the stake in the ground. Now, I want people to come up to me and say, well, internally, this is what I think happened. We can dig in from here, but this is like the first step into transparency. This is what the books look like now. If somebody has internal records that show that it should be different, just let us know, and we're just gonna compare, absolutely.
So how do we do it a little better than people's notes? Do we look to our current auditor and say, let's look at the last 4 years of the CPC numbers, what came in, what went out, what's been spent, and what the actual number is?
Sure, you could do that.
Isn't that a more professional way to do it than just comparing notes to what CPC might think they have and what we might think we have?
Yeah, as part of the regular audit, you could, every time you do an audit, they said, is there any special area of focus that you'd like us to look at? And they could, as part of the regular audit, they could put some extra attention to the internal controls around accounting for the Community Preservation Act type of thing. You could absolutely do that. Who's the auditor here? Is it,
I don't know their new name, but it was Powers and Sullivan.
Oh,
They-
this is funny. Powers and Sullivan. They got gobbled up by Markham, the big fish. Then MHM gobbled them up. Because it just reminds me when I was in the accounting class, somebody says, oh, we got minnows and whales. And somebody says, I just switched them up. And the teacher says, whales eat minnows, minnows don't eat whales. But that is, yeah, so that's it. You could definitely do that. But the whole thing about accounting is the accountant is the recorder of the records, okay? But there has to be somebody that keeps track, that checks on the account. Like if for instance, I'm the town clerk, so I keep track of, I collect this much in dog fees, I collect this, and this is my budget. I'm supposed to keep track of that, and that way, when the accountant gives me the reports, I can say, you're wrong, I did this, I did that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a check and balance. So who in the town is the check on the town accountant as far as the Community Preservation Committee goes?
Michael.
I would defer to the town administrator to answer that question. And then I have one more question, and then a statement.
Let's go to the TA and town administrator and see if we can get that question answered. Who oversees CPC's numbers?
With the finance director.
With the finance director.
So my answer would be the finance director said he filed a CP2 report. I would add, it's due 30th.
Yes.
So we did have it in order and filed early, so we thank Eric for that. I believe there's a CP1 form, or is it CP3?
There's two. A CP1 form is simply how much was committed for CPC tax, and that's the number that they use to give the state match, whatever it's gonna be. So that's, then the CP3 really has nothing to do with finance. That's filed by the CPC committee. So there's
My
two.
answer would have been the CP3 form, but it doesn't sound like that's the correct answer.
Yeah, another question, Michael?
Yeah, so through you, I think we need to put on the agenda and figure out who that person's gonna be, and then to our goal and objectives related to processes, so that somebody is picking up where somebody left off. This seems like a perfect example as we as we start to go forward with that. I notice on this CPT form that there's no administrative expenses, and I know that administrative expenses is a thing. So I wonder what that number is, which I guess we could hold for the audit. And then the other one would be an explanation on what gifts, grants, and donations of $400,000 is.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, yeah, you're right, I don't see any administrative expenses here, and hence, maybe there should be some administrative expenses, so somebody could keep track of the money and so forth on the committee.
They're expending them, so they exist.
Right.
So we need to find that number, which I guess also plays into why we should hire an auditor and really
Yep.
true up these numbers. I say this, and I'm gonna contradict myself, but how can CPC have any faith in us this year and themselves and their ability to vote on projects if they're not exactly sure on what's in it? I'm not speaking to you, Eric, I'm speaking in general. But how are they gonna not hold back money if they don't know what that number is? So for me, truing up these numbers isn't something that we wait till an end of year, do an audit. This would be something that we call and we ask Powers and Sullivan or whoever the whale is now to do this audit so that we can get them a number. And the contradiction part of it is, I'm not sure how many more projects we should be going forward on. And this is a conversation for later based on the 26 still open projects that we already have and others that aren't even on the list that we have to. And in my mind, it might be time to take a pause and finish things before we vote through a whole bunch of new things. But we should at least give CPC the tools to know what they have in there so that they have a fair shot at giving people projects when they come before them. And there, Mr. Chair, I would ask that you work through the town administrator and we get back very soon the possibility of an audit on these funds now and not wait and push that timeline out again.
Thank you. Any other board members?
No, I would agree with Michael as far as, I think timing is important on this. I don't think we want to sit back and just go through another town meeting hoping that we have the correct number. And to shore up those line items would be helpful to not only the CPC, but to all the townspeople at town meeting. So I'd support that and look to see that happen sooner than later.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and in support of what Michael is saying, we just went through 2 finance directors after Carol Capola, and to my knowledge, we didn't do that kind of an audit to do a handoff. Never seen anything like that myself in the private sector. We're pretty far away from the last time we actually really knew what was going on in all those buckets and the expenditures. So I wholeheartedly agree we need an audit.
Thank you, Don, and I would say I agree wholeheartedly, 100%. What is a reasonable, maybe this isn't a question that can be answered right now, but what's a reasonable amount of time to true up these, to true up this account?
Well, it depends on how far back you want to go. That's the thing.
That's why I'm asking this question.
It all
of the board
depends on
here.
that. If you want to go back 15 years, it's going to be a lot. If you want to go back 5 years, not so much.
I'd like consensus from the board, so I know which way to move here.
Carol, 4. From 4.
I'm good with 4.
4? Consensus of the board?
I can go with that.
And if that report's a hot mess, we look at going back more.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman, if I could while you're discussing it. So I'd look for a little clarification. I heard the member mention that through the town administrator. I'll look to my colleague on my left. Every finance director that I've worked with has stated that as finance director, they're the town accountant, and as town accountant, they're the auditor in the absence of a town auditor. They make it clear that they work with the auditors. Is that something that Mr. Kinshirf should be doing with the auditors? Or is it something that a town administrator can do? Because I know in talking directly with Powers and Sullivan, as much as they appreciate all that we do in administration, they don't want us in on their audit process.
Well, okay, through the chair, did direct, all the information that they're going to audit, they're going to have to ask the finance department, they'll probably have to ask me and says, all right, give me the report for the last, 4 years, the Jimmy general ledger. Give me all the town meeting minutes, and they're gonna audit them. So, like, functionally, like, symbolically, the town administrator can say, hey, we need this done, but then he's not gonna be able to go to the, general ledger and give them reports and so forth. So, I don't know, whatever way you wanna coordinate it. If you guys direct Powers and Sullivan, to do the audit, the finance department can make sure they have all the information that, at their disposal to do what they need to do to check it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this town, in this charter, the finance director reports directly to the select board.
Okay,
So if we were to ask for such an audit, that isn't the top of the pyramid when you get to the finance director. The finance director reports to us. So if we feel the need for an audit, you don't need to have Mr. Powers ask you to do the audit.
so the protocol would be, is you hire the auditors as a board, so you'd communicate to the auditors that, hey, I want an audit of all the CPC funds, then the auditor's gonna go to you, well, I need some information from your finance director. Then you'd say, give them whatever they need, and you'll tell the auditors, if he doesn't give you what you need, let me know, type of thing.
Sure. Back to my point about a reasonable time frame.
Yep.
With everything that you've got going on right now, is this something that is a heavy lift for you to add? If this board initiated this audit sooner rather than later, is this something that would just tip you over the edge? Or is this something that could be managed right now?
Well, I think a reasonable would be, it would have to be done, like, probably to be completed, like, say, in March before the next annual town meeting, like, with all the stuff that has to be done. It's not that, if that's the only thing that I had to do, or we had to do, it might take like a month or so, but with the other things, I'm thinking like, if I was to do it on my own, it would probably take me to March. If you're gonna have another outside auditor do it, I mean, realistically, that's probably what you're looking at.
I believe we're talking about having an outside auditor do this?
So that would be a question to them, but my thought is, I'd say they'd probably give you a final product in like 6 months from the time that you ask them.
Okay, Michael?
So I nominate Jeff. In lieu of.
Do the audit?
In lieu of what Mr. Powers said, to at least reach out to the audit company and get a time frame from the audit company and a checklist of what they're gonna need to get it done. I don't believe that we can wait. I believe that this is something that's gonna be very important on the creation of the warrant, very important on what the CPC committee is to do with their applications, so on many levels. And thank you, Eric, for bringing up, so we're clear, Jeff's gonna do it?
I appreciate you.
To be clear on the, and then we would rely on Jeff to get to you with what the auditor said, and then we could come back with a timeline.
As far as turnaround time, I'd commit, if the auditors give me a list of stuff to do, I'll commit to, like, within 7 days, like, within a week, I'll have them, all the information that they're looking for back to them so they can do their job. So that's the part that I can control.
I'm thrilled with the fervor of the board here. Can I, do you have something you want to?
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to nominate me for something else?
No, but I am voting for you.
Thank you.
This is something I'm pretty sure Bob and Dave out there in the audience will agree to. March is not helpful for them to go through the current grant cycle from the CPC. They're already going to be awarding what they're going to be awarding. That's what's been bothering everybody for the last several years, is it has not been transparent or even apparent to them, Bob preceding Dave, about what's available to disperse. So, I mean, I get what you're saying about March, but as being feasible on your end, but on their end, that's completely useless until fiscal '26.
So my advice would be to talk to, Powers and Sullivan, or the derivation thereof, to say we have a priority project. Can you turn something around for us? Is it realistic, like within 30 to 60 days or something? To see what they say.
Thank you, and thank you for that, Don, and I agree wholeheartedly. March is just too late. Joe, could you get me a name and a contact? Email me tomorrow of who to contact regarding this audit? The whale, so to speak, or Eric?
Our present whale?
Our present
Yes.
whale, yes.
They had-
No, that's not where either one of us was going, Eric.
They haven't changed. We still have
The partner is the same, whoever
Okay.
your partner was before, that's the partner.
Romina and,
Okay, Romina, okay, yeah, and Renee?
Renee, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Name by
Whoever that
any
is, I'll
other
make a
name.
phone call tomorrow. Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comments or input on truing up CPC?
Yeah.
Michael?
It's not really related to that. The timelines, Eric, are becoming more and more important because we are slipping on some things and we're not giving people the information. 6 weeks ago, I asked for a timeline that you gave us tonight on closing the books and free cash. Not blaming anybody, but we haven't gotten it until tonight. So I would like to have that timeline that you came prepared with tonight. If you could email that to the board, that would be excellent. And then a timeline, as Pete alluded to, on what we're gonna look at by way of numbers. I think you said March or whatever that is. But I would like to see what that timeline looks like, because some of this is gonna factor into our ability to create articles, not in a rush. And some of it's is an organizational piece that we're gonna have to bring back and determine how important it is. So if we could get the timelines that we're discussing from you, that would be excellent. And I would close with, thank you and your firm
Yep.
for taking two very important roles right now, two of the most important offices. One thing that I'm looking for and been waiting for is someone to say, we need help. Other than the fact that we need to hire people and then maybe use your firm, but as you're looking at this and creating timelines, I would love to hear from you. This is another resource that I can throw at it. And anything that we can do to get ourselves in a better position going into budgeting season. If you need more, we don't know unless we're asked for it.
Okay.
We only know if we're behind, and it always seems to be at budget time that we are behind. So I'm looking for you to say, I need help. We offered this to the last finance director too, and they didn't bite. But the board should at least have that discussion.
Absolutely. So I agree, and thank you for saying that, because right now I'm like, okay, that's
Right.
gauntlet's been passed. That's a great opportunity for the finance director. I know, like, one of the things is that would like to get the, like, as far as your treasurer collectors stuff goes, like, get people trained and so forth. So no, it's all good. So no, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else on that topic? No? Okay, let's move to the free cash, please.
Okay, free cash, we kind of, the free cash basically is gonna, I'm gonna submit it in October 18th. It'll come like a couple weeks after. Like I said, like right now, I'm thinking, it's a public meeting, so I guess, I'd say like $5 million, like if for planning purposes, like I wouldn't plan on appropriating any more than $5 million at the special town meeting, as of now. And as we go through our processes and reconciliations and so forth, I can keep you updated. So, so we're on track to, get this free cash certified. And I was going back through your records again, and I noticed, I was feeling, looking at the last couple of years, I said, oh, wow, they got it certified late. I think we could probably, that's pretty easy, that's a low bar to meet. But then I looked at your previous years, you've actually had your free cash certified. One year was like in August. So you actually, I was like, wow, you guys had it really good. So I will try to let you know what the finance department needs to, as far as resources and training and so forth, so you can get on some type of schedule like you had before, like say like probably like 5-6 years ago.
So I have a question based on one of Dawn's comments. How do we post for a special town meeting without the knowledge of our free cash?
Okay, you could, like I said, you can have articles that appropriate from free cash, and as your finance director, I'm just giving you some guidance that I wouldn't not put anything more than, that's appropriate more than $5 million from free cash. So you can post for the town meeting and put articles on it, and as long as the free cash is certified before the meeting takes place, because I've been in some towns where the free cash was, you don't want to do this, but free cash was certified like the day before town meeting was going to happen. some like crazy towns. So I don't think, I think if you wanted to have a town meeting, you could plan on it now. If you wanted to wait until like later October and so forth, you could, you'd have a more clear figure. But it all depends on what you want to accomplish at the special town meeting. So what I'm telling you right now is we're committed to get that free cash. If you're gonna have a town meeting on November 25th, I would say that you could schedule it and not to plan on appropriating more than 5 million for that. And I think we could have that certified, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not that I'm a big fan of guessing what we're appropriating. But beyond that, I think we all agreed here, the under 3 million figure for this past year was historically low by the last several years. So if that was low, let's say it was,
Yeah.
should have been between 4 and 5,
Right.
then we still have the money from last year that it should have been before, about that amount of money. When were you gonna get your arms around the 2 fiscal years put together? Because that's more than the actual amount that was certified this past year.
Well, basically, I'll give you some anecdotal evidence, and it's probably real. There was a couple things like last year that happened. One is some of the bills went out late, so like the motor vehicle excise tax bills and so forth. So if the bills go out late, the revenue doesn't come in on time. So when the bills get caught up, then the free cash for that year gets put up. So I think that might be part of it.
Yeah, I get that, but in doing what you're suggesting without a real number associated with it,
You don't have to do it. I'm just thinking-
if
yeah.
I could finish, without a real number associated with it, we run the risk of a number of things that are not like personnel costs, that are things that we have normally funded through free cash at the annual town meeting. We're rolling a dice then to see whether or not we have that available, because we're using the same pool of money, without a greater certainty about how large that pool is. Before I dive in and find my head hitting the bottom of the pool, I'd like to know what's available then for May too, so that we don't wind up over-committing the money.
So if that's the case, I think that, just wait for the actual free cash to be certified, that you'll have the actual number. And that'll probably, if I send it in on the 18th, I'll try to get them to rush it. Maybe they can have it for you guys like begin in November or so forth.
Again, this is all timelines.
Yeah,
Can't hold a town meeting without probably 30 to 40 days lead time.
right.
So what that brings you to is what you're really saying in English, we're not going to hold a November town meeting if we do it that way.
Yeah, if you want like right. So sometimes in life, you gotta take roll the dice a little bit, and.
I get it, I'm
totally
just
up to
trying
you. Right.
I'm just trying to translate the finances into real English, which is, if we do that, it's not likely then that we could hit the timeline that we need to hit to call
Right.
a special.
Yeah, and so, say you did put an article at town meeting, and then you said, oh, that free cash is not quite what we want it to be. Then at town meeting, you just indefinitely postpone the article or amend it for a lower amount.
And have the cars running while we're saying that so we could get out of town fast?
I don't know. I just try to be logical.
I understand, and thank you for your input. Anyone else? No, Michael?
No, I would just say thank you to Eric again. I think shedding some light on some things, and that's a board decision on whether or not we're gonna
Absolutely.
gamble on a project. And I would just remind the board that we have already committed to putting an article together for the Judah Eldridge for CPC to get them their money back on that. And we've already talked about reimbursing the cell tower funds to get that into the housing. So there's some money already spent. So whatever the number is, we're gonna deduct somewhere close to $1 million out of the gate. So to Don's point, that number is more critical.
But to your point, I think your point is the board's gonna have to determine whether or not we want to roll the dice.
Correct.
So we'll put that on an agenda in the next week or two. Nope.
Your next item under this topic is special town meeting.
Right.
So we can continue the discussion.
I don't know if we're all ready to
If-
decide,
well,
but we
if-
can
if I
certainly
could,
continue.
though.
Yeah.
There are several different types of articles that may go before a special town meeting. Not all of them require appropriation, and not all of them that require appropriation require free cash. So you've been talking about special town meeting as it relates to the availability of free cash. That number is do not exceed 5 million. But that doesn't mean there's nothing else that we could do at special town meeting, number one. And number two, it doesn't mean that's the only funding source. So as we get into the annual town meeting discussion and the articles that you have for the next topic, we can talk about those topics that could have come up in November, or, as Mr. Kinshirp has said, with one of the funding sources being free cash, you could hold off to a later date.
Okay.
But it's not just about appropriations. There are other actions that can take place. We've talked before about the assessing articles. Those are actions that town meeting are required to take. There's no appropriation necessary, and I think there's value in having that done for the assessors. There may be one or two other items. So we typically don't have, I defer to you folks, maybe no more than 6, 7, 8 articles tops. But free cash isn't the only part of that story. It's a big part of the story, but it's not the only part.
Okay. Thank you. Pete?
So that kind of goes along, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What Joe was just saying kind of goes along with my thought process of, I think I'd like a better idea of what articles we're contemplating as to whether or not we even move forward with a special. November 25th, tonight's the first I've heard of that date. And in my opinion, it may be a challenging date to get people to attend. I believe there's a holiday in and around that time frame. So what's going to draw people to town meeting? We don't want to simply put things onto a town meeting warrant and have a handful of people show up to make the decisions for the town when perhaps some of them can wait for a future meeting. But again, I need to see more information before, I would have any desire to move forward.
Fair enough. Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just be really explicit here. We passed a capital plan in May that contained one of the things that we were going to discuss. To change that part is a 2/3 vote to change because it's in the capital plan. Only those things that were already captured are really contemplated to be able to be discussed at a fall town meeting. So we can't change that at all. And to your point about attendance, 2/3 vote is a really tall order in the fall if hardly anybody shows up. I'm just putting that out there.
Thank you. Anything else, Michael?
So to Pete's point, can we see any articles that we've talked about or what you're contemplating from prior discussions, things that you would recommend if we so choose that would go on a fall town meeting warrant?
Certainly, but I would have to then disagree with the previous speaker. My understanding is the item that was on the capital plan is on the capital plan. The question of funding does not require a 2/3 vote. It would require.
If you expanded the scope of what you were funding, it surely would. You're funding something that already has a formed scope in the capital plan. It has defined parameters about what it is you agreed to fund. It was built from the bottom up for certain things to happen that aggregated to a certain amount. The amount can change, but you can't change the scope of the work without actually asking to do that, because the capital plan's already been approved at the town meeting.
To continue, I don't disagree with that. It was my understanding that there's an item on the capital plan where we were going to talk about funding it at a special town meeting. The November 25th date came from a conversation I had with the town clerk back in March. If we had to do a special town meeting, knowing that it would be in the fall of a presidential election. The two dates that were offered were September. It was a non-starter because we have all this information coming up. The other date that was offered, that is the sole purview of the board to set, was Monday, November 25th, because it's after the presidential enough that our clerk should hopefully have the bandwidth to do that meeting that night. In a moment, to progress to item number 6, the other element that we'd have to talk about is the setting of the tax rate, which must happen, if I can say it that way, must happen in, well, it has to happen before January, correct?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
So we typically set our tax rate late October, mid-November. This year, with a potential special town meeting, we were looking at early December. So if you don't have a special town meeting, we'd go back to our regular schedule for setting the tax rate. But once you do that, that has a great impact on what you can do at a special town meeting. Is that accurate?
Right. You just want to make sure that the DOR doesn't, they don't want you to have special town meetings right after you set the tax rate. So basically, yeah, a November 25th special town meeting would have to report that on the tax rate recap. And one of the, probably item number 6, other financial related topics. One of the topics that we didn't discuss was setting the tax rate, and that's the town accountant has a portion that they have to fill out. The assessors have the main, most important, and then the town clerk has a role in that as well. So that's something that we'll be working on, in October, November, so.
So to Michael's point, is this something maybe we could have in the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Yes.
The articles.
The purpose, so what I was trying to achieve in your meeting tonight is a flow. And that flow then carries over to after we talk about this. So we're talking about special town meeting generally. We're going to talk about annual town meeting generally with some specific topics after this. The next step would be, presumably on the 23rd, when you're fully assembled, to talking specifically about the special town meeting in November, if that's when it is, based on these topics that the finance director is covering tonight.
Excellent.
So that was always the intent.
Right.
And that's why these conversations right now are critical.
Absolutely. Anything else from the board? All right, let's move to the other financial-related topics.
I just want to touch on it just briefly. Like I said, we're going to do the tax rate. The other topic that I'm going to be looking at is the tax title. And once we get direction from the board, the third topic would be the Community Preservation Committee, Community Preservation Act audit, so-called audit. So that's it. Those are the other topics that I can see that's on our radar. And if Powell and Sullivan can't do it in time or whatever, I'll do my best to, do what I can to, reconcile, to work with anybody or to reconcile the votes to what actually happened in the books and so forth. Because I understand that it's important, and it would be good to have an agreement on like where everybody stands, or you don't have all this angst,
Well, thank you for recognizing, Joe.
There was another topic that we're going to get into as well, the 5-year financial outlook. So as you know, before our last finance director came on board, I was working with the Department of Local Services. Then the finance director was working with them. Mr. Kinshirf and I have talked about that. I don't want to steal your thunder or corner you in any way, but the finance director has some thoughts generally about a 5-year outlook document. So we have a document that I think the DLS said they were about 80% done with. We were waiting for the debt that you did, the interim loan note tonight, that we had done the borrowing before. Do you want to speak to a 5-year outlook plan?
Sure. Basically, our firm does 5-year forecasts for a lot of different towns, and we've worked with the DLS before. So in one town, we took what the DLS did, kind of bifurcated it, took the historical part out. So bottom line is, we have a template that we can use to come up with some sort of 5-year forecast if we need to. But we'll probably just leverage the work that DLS has done, provide them whatever they need to do that. So, we can do that. We have a lot of experience with that, so.
And what would be the reasonable amount of time to put something like that together for us?
Well,
Get that tomorrow?
So I've already reached out to that resource at the Division of Local Services to check in with, I think we have the data set that she was looking for before. So if I can get her to identify that, I'll confirm with Eric that it's the most up-to-date data. Then I think what Eric's saying is what we get back from them is something that he's gonna be able to re-energize based on all of the reports that have to be done capturing fiscal year '24. Because that's the only other part of it right now. It's a stale dated report that it was relying upon data for fiscal year '23. So now that we're gonna have fiscal year '24 data, that's where DLS gets it. It's what we report. It's from the tax rate recap. It's from the CPC reports and a whole bunch of other reports that he's doing anyway. So I would I want a 5-year forecast, and I've wanted it. We need it for the next 5 years that we're gonna plan on, and this is not just capital. So for me, we need it this fall. And so if we can't get it from DLS, I think Mr. Kinshirf and I have enough data to get something very solid. I think Eric's being a little bit deferential. I've seen the DLS spreadsheet, it's daunting, and I've seen Eric's work, and it's not daunting. So I would love to be able to modify it to the way that Eric can train me on it.
Right.
But it's critical, and we all need it sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Anything more from the board?
I just want to reiterate to Eric that, and you said, and thank you for your generous offer, if Powers and Sullivan can't do it, I think it's important, at least to me, and from what I heard from the board, not to get sidetracked on something or bogged down on something else. As important as CPC is, I would hope that we would take a different step first, and for you to find another resource besides Power and Sullivan, not Power and Sullivan. If they can't do it, then we should look for somebody else and not bog you down at a time.
I like that idea. And
So-
that's, yeah, no, that's great. Did we have a couple other people
Right.
that we can do it? I like that idea as well.
In the minnow.
They were bait.
Anything else from the board?
You know?
Okay. So I'll just close by saying first, both town administrator and Eric clearly have put in a lot of work to get what you've presented us tonight done and here to this table. If there's anything for me that's come out of this, is we need to do this a bit more often. This is incredibly valuable for me. And I think it brings us all onto the same page with expectations that are going to be met. And, you know, I'm going to be in this seat now maybe for another, I don't know, 15 days. So if you need anything from me, now's your shot. You
Oh,
get
yeah.
15 more days. But I know Julie will support it as well. So I just want to thank you for being here tonight. If the board doesn't have any more questions or comments,
He's not going anywhere.
we'll move on to the next.
He's gonna stay here for a
we
couple
will
more
move on
topics,
to the-
but
We'll move on to the next
he will
item.
now go from primary to secondary.
Okay, so, yeah, Don?
Mr. Chair, before we go past, so I assume we could get a draft look by next week about what we might be able to put on a town meeting in the fall?
So again, I'm targeting the 23rd, when the full board's here and based on all the other projects we're working on. If
So
I
we
could-
would have to act that night, or else we wouldn't be doing the special then?
No, we're still within the time frame for a special.
I don't see how.
What's the timeline for the special? When do we need to act for the special?
It's within 35 days, so if you want to set the date next week and open the warrant next week, you can do that. But as far as articles, we don't have the bandwidth to get that back, plus we need a full board.
I was just counting from the 25th back to the 23rd of October.
But, sorry, I was talking about September 23rd.
Right, September 23rd. That gives plenty of time. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. If we had some draft articles, I'd feel a lot more, I don't know how I feel about, there's a lot of balls in the air right now, including how much money we're going to have available, which isn't going to be available at that point either, on the 23rd.
No, it's not. However,
You can, sorry,
go ahead, please.
you can call a town meeting. You can set the date, the time, the place. You can take the act of opening the warrant. October 23rd is cutting it very close. That's why we're not looking at that date. We're looking at September 23rd. September 16th is too fast.
2 weeks.
But September 23rd should be more than sufficient to get into the procedural matters for a special town meeting.
I got that. I'm just worried that the gentleman to your left is talking more towards mid and late October, ultimately,
For certification. you're
for
talking.
certification.
That's exactly right.
So
We-
there's
we've
two different
done-
things going on here.
Not to argue the contrary. We're not saying opposite items. Funding sources are always in flux for a period of time. So article concepts, the scope of the articles, are being written and are imagined, meaning not made up. We have a sense. So working with council on the annual town meeting articles that we're gonna talk about next, and I can work with council and have been working with council on other articles to come up at special town meeting. It is always the next question of where is the funding going to come from? When we do our annual town meeting, you know as well, we're doing our motions meeting in the middle of October because we're still waiting for outside figures to come in. We have the vast majority of our numbers in place, but we're still waiting on state aid, local charges and things like that. So for the special town meeting, having, when Mr. Kinshirf and I met, I think, probably 2 weeks ago, that time frame dovetails well with what I was looking for. To be able to close the books by October 4th is not extraordinary for any town. It is a great act for them to do it in our town, given where we've been. To have free cash submitted on October 18th, and I think Eric's already said it, when he sends it in, he's already worked on their checklist, and I also know they don't send it in a vacuum. They're talking to their resources at Division of Local Services. They're gonna come back maybe with a tweak or two, but he gave us a cap. I'm not gonna go anywhere near 5 million on using free cash. And as we go through the discussion of the warrant, the validity of the articles, we may decide not to go forward on that. But I can count at least 2 articles related to assessors and at least 2 other articles related to general administration that should go before a special town meeting. The only other article I was aware of was the funding mechanism for that capital plan item from last annual town meeting. So I think if we meet on September 23rd and we have the framework of the warrant book and the place, the date, the time, and all that, I think we're doing very well. And I know we're doing it on timeframes when we had special town meetings, when we had our long-serving finance director.
Okay. Anything else, Tom?
Nope, we'll see.
Yes, we will. All right, let's move on to item C. Discussion of 2025 annual town meeting and articles related to zoning bylaw changes.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, what you should have in your packet under item C is first, a working list. As you know, we were talking, I think, at a meeting, 2 meetings past, where the chair and I were going to, sorry, the other chair and I were going to sit down to review notes to make sure we've captured everything. But staff and I have compiled this list. I'll walk through it in a moment, but I also just want to identify what you see added to that list is the paperwork that needs to be filled out whenever we do zoning bylaw changes. So when staff and I met at the end of August with working with council, council reminded us that for zoning bylaw amendments, there is such a thing as being too early. It has to be done within a 6-month time frame. So there are some things we're gonna have to sort of hold back time-wise, but staff and I are very much aware of those topics, and we'll make sure that we work through the select board to get them back to the planning board for all the required hearings. Mr. Chairman, members, I can go through the list if you'd like, or I'll take any questions on the list, whichever you prefer.
Let's go with questions first. Anything from the board? Does the board have an interest in town administrator going through the articles?
No.
No, okay. Thank you for putting it together and starting the conversation.
Sure, absolutely.
Sure.
I think, I'll expand on my no. You definitely hit the customary articles and the few that we've talked about, the additional Judah Eldridge, cell tower, assessors. So I think it's an accurate reflection of our conversation so far.
Don?
However, speaking of that, Mr. Chair, we've gotten 2 opinions from the self-same person who's no longer with us as to whether or not you can have a special purpose fund to collect and aggregate past 1 fiscal year the lease payments for the cell tower. We had been doing that for 20 years, and we had been building it up and dispersing it first as a select board to an actual project, and later, in about 2019 on, to take a vote each year to decide what we were going to allocate into the housing trust funds. So before we actually put an article together, we have to actually figure out which one of our finance directors who just left was right. Do we really have the ability to have, she said in her last missive before she left, that there was a special purpose fund, and that there was no need to actually collect any money. So I am thoroughly confused, and I'm not willing to put an article on any town meeting without knowing, do we need it or do we don't need it?
Sounds like an agenda topic, Jeff.
Definitely does.
Wrote it down right there.
Thank you.
And I do believe we did land on, we could also create a policy rather than go the route we've been going. So that's something to bring back and then just,
Sure, but it wouldn't need a town meeting for that. We could do our own policy.
right.
Is there anybody that you would want to have here for that agenda item? Anyone specific?
I mean, I think we have a legal opinion. So outside of what
Which doesn't
Kathleen
conform
said.
to what Kathleen said.
Right, so outside of what Kathleen said, I think we bring back the legal opinion, and I think the board votes on whether or not it wants a policy, which is, I'm gonna go yes on that rather than an article.
I would vote yes on that, too. Okay, thank you. Anything more on item C? Joe, you want to add anything?
No, not at this time.
Great. Okay, moving on to item D. This is mine, discussion and review of Brooks Academy lease agreement. Brooks Academy is certainly in the forefront of many, many discussions. And my interest was to make sure all the i's and t's were dotted.
There's one before that. There's
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I
bylaw
skip?
charter review committee.
Sorry. Yes. Let me back up. Thank you, Don. Discussion of the next steps and tasks for charter bylaw. So for me, this is, again, this is a preliminary discussion so that we can get ahead of this for annual town meeting. If there are any, Joe?
Sorry, and just
Please.
talking with the finance director, I apologize. Would you be agreeable to taking item G out of order? I forget that our finance director, although a Cape Cod resident, might have to cross a bridge.
Oh, yes, yes.
So, so I can jump into that right away.
Please, go ahead.
So discussion and possible vote on hiring a search firm. So, to the earlier discussion, I've identified, so we know that there are 3 private sector firms that typically do executive management searches in municipalities, town administrators, town managers, finance directors. I think you've heard of them before. That's Community Paradigm Associates. That's the firm run by Bernie Lynch. You have Grow White Consulting. Rick White used to be administrator in Dennis. And then there's Municipal Resources Incorporated. I'm not as familiar with them. They're New Hampshire-based, but they have done searches in Massachusetts. So if the board wanted to go that route, we'd have to go procurement. The 4th one is the Collins Center at my alma mater, UMass Boston. And Mary Flanders Icardi is the lead on that. We wouldn't have to do procurement because it's UMass Boston, so it's essentially an intermunicipal agreement. So the 3 firms would require some level of procurement and search. Collins Center's easier, but we do know that part of the Kinshirf contract is for Eric to help the town search for a finance director. So I think you've alluded to it a little bit, but Eric and Ed were going through GFOA.
Yeah, we're trying to go through some of our associations and getting the word out. Mass Government Finance Office Association, Accountants Association. We're trying to do some like networking for us to try to get some, generate some interest for the position, so.
So I did want to have that conversation about the 4 firms. You could also pick the brain of my colleague here, because I think there are others that have relied upon his firm as well, so.
Thank you. Pete, I think you brought this up a couple meetings ago, so if there's anything you'd like to lead with?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, and I'm not saying that I'm not interested in hearing Eric's process and past accomplishments, but I'd be okay with going through the procurement process, because I'd love to have all the entities present to us essentially their portfolio, and how they approach it, and some of the success stories that they've had. It's been a long time since I've dealt with the municipal search group, But I find the position of finance director, as we've talked about ad nauseum this evening, to be extremely important to this community. And again, no disrespect to either gentleman sitting to my left, but it's clearly a position that we need to get filled as quickly as possible with the best candidate available. So I understand the procurement process can slow things down a bit, but I'd really like to hear from these groups to know what they offer, how they approach this, and some of their success stories. So that's just my 2 cents on how I would like to go forward.
For the board members?
He's got 4 cents, so I'm throwing my 2 in his.
I don't think I understood that, but okay.
He's throwing his 2 cents in, and I'm with him on this.
All
We
right,
should go out.
There's, 4 cents. I get it now. Mike,
Got to stay quick here.
I know, well.
I'll agree.
Yeah, I think I'd like to get a better understanding of potential cost for these procurements. Do we have an idea of what these firms?
So generally speaking, for a search like this, you would imagine it costs more than 10,000, and you would hope that it's less than 50,000. So when it's in that time frame, we would need to do 3 requests for quotes, solicitations. We could send it out to all 4 firms, including the Collins Center, even though they're not required to be procured. But there are several questions that need to be answered. First is, what is the funding source that we can rely upon for this search? We have the line items in our fund accounting software, but to my knowledge, there's no funds presently available. It's not a deal breaker, but we would have to have the funding for our cycle of procurement. Secondly, when the board talks about wanting to talk to them, you can. However, I know one of the firms, when the town was looking to do a search about 5 years ago, one of the respondents objected and felt that the town was encroaching on violating the procurement laws. Because you're either gonna do a request for quotes and get a response, or you're gonna talk to them, so we'd have to massage that a little bit. Not insurmountable, but my questions always to department heads are, sure, where's your funding? Sure, where's your funding?
Sure.
And then we can go from there. I mean, it can be turned around fairly quickly. There are a number of searches that are going on right now, but this is not really their busy season. That tends to be the spring.
And agreed, and great point about the funding. And, you know, I think if need be, we go to the finance committee and ask them for their reserve to help fund this. But it goes back to the point, your question, right? What's it gonna cost? What's the timeframe look like? Those are all the questions I want answered by these groups, because that's gonna help us determine if we move forward, or at a minimum, who we move forward with and how we approach it. So, but again, at a minimum, I would say if we can't discover money available in other line items, then we go to the FinCom.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you need from us? Okay, go ahead.
That was actually the biggest question. So what I can do is, you know, working with our procurement, that's our assistant town administrator as well, we'll look at building the request for quotations. And so what that would be is, the town of Harwich is looking to do a search. This is the time frame we're looking to do the search. This is the position we're looking to fill. The town is asking for respondents to tell us, 1, how much you think it's gonna cost, what your approach would be, et cetera, et cetera. So we can do the solicitation, and then I can work within the confines of the law and council to get that information back to you. Timing-wise, I don't think I'd be able to do it before the 23rd. But we can absolutely get moving on it. And we also hope that the work that Mr. Kinshirf and others has done, because we are actively advertising on Mass Municipal Association, Government Finance Officers Association, and others.
Yep.
So we can do all this, and I can get back to you certainly by the end of the month.
Okay, so no further action, no vote, no consensus. You have the directive and you'll move.
I'd never say no to a vote, but you've answered the questions I need to be getting a procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one place that I would look first, I'm sure you would agree, is that we've had lapses in service time between a number of people in the finance division, including the finance director and a couple of other positions. I'm just interested in knowing what that translated into, because we appropriated as if they were fully staffed by people that we hired for the entire year. You know, how much is left of that after we did the contract things with the two gentlemen?
So I've generally analyzed that, and it wouldn't be sufficient for the purposes we're looking at. Again, it's not a huge amount. I do believe that that is why there are reserve fund transfers and other mechanisms for just these occasions. And I don't know that, I mean, I can't imagine that Finance Committee would object. Everybody wins with a full-time finance director, Select Board, Town Administrator, and certainly Finance Committee, and all the others.
Great. Anything else from the board? Okay, so,
Thanks, Eric.
and Joe, if it's okay with you, I would like to take old business item B out of order, if that,
I would never object to that because
Okay.
of the person it helps.
thank you very much. Megan. So we're taking old business item B out of order. It's the update
Welcome to
on the
sit here.
progress of the preschool stipend program.
Sorry, we were hoping you'd take item A.
That's what I meant.
Yep.
The update on the assistant town administrator and ongoing projects in procurement.
We can also update you on this, on the stipend program. Thanks for having me tonight. I did provide an update in your packet. The last one you had, I believe, was from late May, early June. So the summer has been a little slower than we would anticipate from an absence on my behalf. But I did incorporate all of the FY25 projects into my total numbers. We have a total of 62 projects that I have on my radar right now, and 26 of them are awaiting initiation according to the chart. Since I have put this out in the public packet, a few department heads have come forward and have started up those procurements, and those are in the Public Works with our mechanic, Kyle Edson, and he has started the procurements for those vehicles. We did complete 4 projects. The police department has been successful in their procurement of vests and tasers. And then we have 9 projects that are in process, whether that is they're out to bid or we're reviewing bids. And we have 8 contracts that are awarded, which means they are being funded either month to month, or we're waiting for the projects to be completed before we expend the funds. Ongoing projects, that is a topic where there isn't a one-time purchase or an IFB for one project. That's, for instance, the cemetery has a memorial tree fund that she uses as needed, as trees are needed for the cemeteries. And then we have 3 projects on hold, and those 3 projects are listed on the memo. One of them is the Brooks Academy Museum article. We are waiting on expending those funds until we have more funding, so we can do all of the project at once. That's the intent. We have the eminent domain taking of 62 Route 28, which is the West Harwich Baptist Church. We're waiting on the proposer on that. And then the last one is Sand Pond Restroom Project. That's the wooden stick building for the actual restroom. We've put that out to bid 3 times, and each time something happens, whether we don't get any bids or the bids are so high we need to go out for more funding. I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the list.
Board?
No, go ahead, Michael.
Michael?
Thanks, Pete. Megan, thank you for the update, and I know it's, certain things on here have been a big frustration to me, but you've done an outstanding job. I'm gonna, and another part of the agenda that we've skipped for the time being is an update on one of the ones that's important to me. We told the public that we were gonna be doing a bid opening around Labor Day, so if we can get a definitive date tonight from the town administrator into that section, that will be helpful. Go back to previous statements that I've made. Some of these projects are really old, and it's gonna be very difficult for me to vote on new projects this year, because we just keep piling them on, and the prices keep going up and going up and going up. And at least one of them in here says we don't have enough money, we need more money for a restroom. And that's 2014, if maybe I'm reading it wrong, my glasses are off. But they're old, really old, and we, the town, needs to take a look at something I've mentioned several times. More people need to do procurement, because we're just piling this on to a person, and it's coming back. And it's not on you, Megan. But when are we going to learn from the past mistakes? And I know that this was a mistake compounded from a past town administrator. But we can't just continue to make excuses and add projects to a list and then not get them done. It's of great frustration to me when people are calling over and over and over again, asking when things are gonna be done. And then a lot of them haven't been started because we're relying on basically one person to start them. So this would be my plea to the board, to come up with something so that we have more people trained in procurement, so this isn't all landing in one person's lap. We did talk about compiling a list of other projects and things as well, because I've heard the word priority used tonight under the finance conversation. And tonight we're adding more procurement to get search firms, which is extremely important. So at what point do we prioritize, or do we continue to add projects on? At great stress, I think, for everybody, including the applicants. So I don't need an answer to anything, but we really need to address the fact that we don't have enough people doing procurement.
Thank you, Michael. Pete?
No, I would agree with Michael's comments, and, you know, in my short time back on this board, it is a frustrating topic, and to see some of these items from 18 and 19 still sitting here, I too hear it out in the community as to the whys. But I guess more importantly, and Megan, you alluded to it, putting this on our agenda occasionally stirs reaction, right, or movement.
Yes.
And so that's a good thing. So the more we can keep this on the forefront, the greater amount of movement we'll get. But I think to Michael's overall point is I'm really going to struggle approving new or new projects or additions to this list when this list is just in a state right now that's not healthy for anyone. And so whether it's procurement or department heads or whatever, it's not a healthy place to be for us as a community. So whatever we can do to clean this up and to move things off of this list, the better it is for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add to what Michael said, not just another contracting or procurement officer, but contract administration. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Issuing a contract is not actually an output or an action. It's an interim. It's a piece of paper that gets you what the project is that you're asking about to be put into play. And we have had a real rough time with the manner in which people have pursued different contracts, the larger ones. So we either need to have a greater willingness to hire project managers, or we have to have a contract administration person that does both, puts out contracts and actually follows up on, the progress and the quality of it.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? Okay. Let's, while you're sitting there.
So, Mr. Chairman, actually,
Yeah,
I would be the
sorry.
lead on, I would be the lead on item B.
Yep.
Insofar as, I met 2 weeks ago, with the Council on Aging Director, and the Finance Division. The program is well underway. The applications are coming in. The applications are not gonna be processed simply by the Council on Aging Director. In fact, last week, the Director of Youth and Family Services, Ashley Symington, reached out, and she'd like to have a hand in it, and I think that's fantastic. So we're gonna meet this week on that part as far as management going forward. We also have the IFB that I talked about. I think you might be able to speak to that, or that. Have you reviewed the IFB for management?
No, I've only reviewed the rental assistance one.
So we have an IFB that can go out on the management program, but for fiscal year '25, we have several department heads that can help with management.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go back up to item B, discussion on next steps and tasks for the Bylaw Charter Review Committee. So for me, this is nothing more than a preliminary discussion. Last year, we had some, I think, fruitful and some important changes made, and I'm just simply looking to get a little jumpstart on the process for this coming annual town meeting. I know the chair, who's here tonight, I believe, there were some things that you had put on the back burner that you may want to bring up, and I'd like to have a joint meeting with the Charter Bylaw Committee at some point in the future. Joe, do you have anything that you would or could add to this conversation of maybe identifying 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 things that you think might be of value for us to?
I had 2 things, but they weren't along those lines.
Okay.
I think it can still help the conversation. As you may recall, after one of your last meetings and presentations with my colleagues on form of government, your chair was working with the chair of the form of government. That chair is Michael Dutton. You might know that name. He's about to become our county administrator. So while the county is going to get a great person, the committee is in flux in that regard. I think we have a meeting the week of the 30th. However, the last person that presented is expected to be the chair. So your chair had a follow-up deliverable with the chair of the form of government committee. So that could still help and still frame your discussions. The other item is the town became aware last week through the governor's office, so that every year they do their community compact grants. So we are eligible in the town of Harwich to pursue a community compact grant because we did not pursue one last year because we couldn't, because we got one the year before. But what they've rolled out this year is a concept called best practices. And under the best practices designation, they have one called general management and governance best practices. And so if I could, Mr. Chairman, just through you, read what that opportunity is for. So the general government and governance best practice has 3 specific items that a town could get a grant for. The first one is to perform a municipality-wide assessment of operations to identify foundational barriers to and potential solutions for long-term financial sustainability, staffing stability, and efficient functions and services. That's a good one. I think the second one is probably more apt. The third one. The second one talks about they could do an assessment, or the money could be used to do an assessment of the executive branch. So if you're looking to change the executive branch of government. But the third one is funds that could be used for a committee to be established to review an existing charter. So I know there's been discussion about a charter commission per se. So if that effort is going forward, we could pursue a grant where funds could be made available, and those funds could be augmented with the funds that are already available. So we have a grant opportunity that might be helpful in these conversations.
What is the deadline on the grant opportunity?
It's a rolling deadline, so they just opened it 2 weeks ago. Like I said, we have experience doing those. I have a draft together where we could pursue funds for that third item. And it's as simple as me submitting. And then they reach out and say if they still have funds available in that bucket. But they are putting an emphasis this year on their best practices category of the community compact grants. So we weren't pursuing any other grants yet under that program, so that might be the best one for us to go after.
That's great information, thank you. Anything from the board on bylaw charter review and some potential things that they could look at?
I think it would be great if they put together a list of things they're looking at.
My next point. Yes.
And anything left over that we didn't accomplish last year.
Fantastic. So I will be in touch with, as I'm the liaison, the chair, and I will work with them on getting that exact thing done if that's the way the board would like to go. And then maybe you and I can have a discussion.
I can put this material in your packet for next week.
Absolutely.
It just came in last week.
Yeah, please. That would be great.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item E. Discussion and review of Brooks Academy lease agreement. As I was saying earlier, this Brooks Academy's on the forefront of everybody's minds right now. So my interest was to just make sure that all the i's and t's were dotted and crossed, make sure that there is in fact a current and working user agreement, license agreement, which there is, and I got that last week. And if the board has anything they want to ask, it's in your packet. Now's the time. Anything from the board? No? Billy? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since it's not on the agenda anywhere, I would like to be able to at least make a pitch that by next week's meeting that we look at what the plan is near term and long term. I know we had a stakeholders meeting where we had a plan, but that plan got blown up. So relative to Brooks Academy, I'd love to know, especially if that doesn't even make the final cut on the special town meeting, what the plan is in the interim, since we asked for a cancellation from the state for even a waiver to be in the building. So that is really important to me to have that discussion. I won't hold a meeting of the subcommittee until I know what the board is doing.
Agreed. And as we spoke earlier, it will be on next week's agenda to have the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you. Linda?
Just a quick comment and a gentle correction. It's a use agreement, and it's with the town of Harwich and the Harwich Historic Society. It's not a Brooks Academy museum. It's a use agreement, not a license, and not a lease, excuse me, but it is a use agreement and is with the Historic Society. I just want to make sure we're all clear on that.
Thank you for the correction. While you're there, if I could ask just one question on this. Liability insurance on the premises and insurance on the contents. That's all intact, up to date, and current.
Costs us a ton of money.
And the town has those copies on record.
They have never asked for them. So we'd be happy to provide the, 600-page liability policy if you'd like to put yourself to sleep reading it.
No, but it just names Harwich as an additional insured.
The endorsement page.
The endorsement page, correct. Just making sure all the paperwork surrounding Brooks Academy and everything around it is intact, in place, and current. And thank you for all your help in getting this, and it is. So, that's all for me. Anything from the rest of the board? Thank you. And now on to item F. Town Administrator, if you'd like to provide the updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding item number 1, status of disposal of the Queen Anne Road land, I think that's actually supposed to say lands. So we have 172, 176, and 246 Queen Anne Road. The invitation for bids are complete. We are moving towards the required advertisements. The advertisements are in the newspaper, on the website, in the town, in the state's central register, which really drives everything, and also on this Commonwealth's combis. So really, everything that drives that is publishing it on the central register. So we have 246 Queen Anne ready to be added to the central register on September 11th, and it has to be in there to be published on September 18th. And we are looking to have those advertisements also in the Chronicle on September 19th, the town website on September 18th. We talked generally that we wanted to do a minimum 30-day advertisement, so that puts us at October 18th. What we're shooting for is proposals coming back no later than October 22nd, so the following Tuesday at 2 p.m., which is our standard when we try to do our bid openings. Within that, we're looking to do a site visit the week of October 7th, and addenda, if necessary, would be accepted on the week of October 11th. I'm going to be sending that out to the board so you can see what that IFB is. And then 172 and 176, they may not be in position to be put in on the central register on September 11th, so we would put them in on September 18th, for September 25th, so everything else would move out. Just a week on that. And same thing, the IFBs will be shared with the board. The last report I gave you, I think, we do not have a firm answer on the question of buildability, but technically speaking, we wouldn't necessarily want to have that. We have done our other IFBs indicating that, you know, it's up to the person buying it to determine buildability, suitability of the lots and all that. And I think we may have talked before the last time, but the combination of 172, 176 is no longer required. So right now, the language that I have identifies each parcel separately with the dollar amounts you've set, but also those two parcels combined. Is there any preference this evening as to whether or not we do one or both? Meaning two parcels individually, and the two parcels could also be sold combined. And the language would be whatever version of that you want to have go out.
Michael?
Last we left it, we had agreed to combine.
Okay. So that'll actually.
775 was the minimum bid.
Correct, and we had 800,000 on the 246.
Correct.
So that actually will reduce the language in the IFB, so we'll see if we can't get that moving at the same time. And then with that, I would imagine, with an October 22nd review, that's a Tuesday, that means you would have had 10/21. I wouldn't want to commit to October 28th, but I think the meeting right after that may be sufficient for you folks to see what the responses were and for you to determine successful bidders.
Can I get what you're reading off of?
Yes.
So that
So
I have
right
the
now,
dates.
yep, it's hard copy notes, but I'll put it together now.
Okay.
Yep.
The sooner I can get that, the better. Then secondly, the other thing that we discussed on the two lots, combining the two lots, was keeping a easement, a utility easement, so that we can cross the highway there if we need to.
So we've been talking about that internally, and I have a conversation set up with council. We may not want to go that route insofar as we can sell it as is. Whoever buys it, we can always come back and do the easement. The question was, if we declared it surplus, but now we're declaring a need for the easement, does that sort of discombobulate everything? So I think right now that the thinking is we can accomplish the easement and we shouldn't do it within the documents.
Okay.
But we are analyzing that. I think that was the only other matter that was holding it up.
Anything else from the board on that item? Nope. Thank you, Joe.
Well, there's 2, 3, and 4 on
Yep,
that.
he's gonna move on to number 2 now.
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, I think technically speaking, 204 Sisson Road use and improvements builds off of the email I sent to the board at your direction, excuse me. So board members should have received an email on August 27th, 2024, whereby you were blind copied to receive the document known as the 204 Sisson Road Harwich Cultural Center Financial Analysis and Recommendations. So, Mr. Chair, you received that. I will defer to you at this point on that document.
Well, thank you, and I would go to the board to see if the board has any input or any thoughts on the document before I begin. Okay, well.
No, go ahead.
No. So it was suggested by the by FinCom's chair, to work with me to gather information for them to do this analysis and put together their recommendations. And they did such the exercise, and we've all taken a look at it. And, you know, I think that most, if not all, of their recommendations surrounded policy changes or policy that this board would oversee. And that's where I was going with my question.
May I, now that I know what this topic is, because it was unclear to me when I read it.
Sure.
First and foremost, it'll be great when FinCom decides to stop talking about one building in town. Because that's all they seem to be able to focus on, and I believe that they're so far outside of their lanes that I actually didn't read that document, because I didn't see the use or need in reading that document. So if FinCom wants to, and either chair, tonight's chair, next week's chair, or when Julie gets back, wants FinCom to come before us and explain what they're doing and why, then I would love that conversation. But to take up more time tonight on a document that really didn't need to be put together by FinCom and is not in their wheelhouse to do, I'd love to have that conversation in public. But it would be great if we could get 1 year under our belt without Finance Committee focusing on one single building in town.
Thank you, Michael. Anything from the other board members?
No, just the same. I assume this was going to be Joe giving us an update on some type of use and improvements at the facility. Although I scanned that document, I'm certainly not prepared to talk about it this evening.
So let's table it. We can all read it again, or for the first time. And maybe we can have FinCom come to one of our meetings and discuss it with us. I think, though, if they're gonna do the exercise for one building, they should do the exercise for all buildings. I think that would be the only appropriate next step for them. And I would also add, through reading it, what constitutes the success of a municipal building? Is it financial? Is it, value added to the community? Is it, cultural? What is it? So I think, Michael, you're right. Let's get them here and they can answer to that, and then they can answer to which next building they're gonna do.
Yeah, well, and more importantly, I think they should do what they're supposed to do.
In addition.
In addition, and not focus on these buildings.
All right, thank
Now that we have this agenda item, I would take the opportunity to ask the town administrator or chair for the topic that I read this as, use and improvements. Where do we stand with the procurement in the building? Where do we stand with the cafeteria? Where do we stand with the cafeteria equipment? Where do we stand with the ball fields out back that I believe we planted some gardens on? Where do we stand with the entirety of that building? Right now, unarguably, the cultural side of that is doing fantastic. People love it, and the programs are amazing, and they just continue to build and build and build, and it really is a gem for the town of Harwich now, and thank you to everybody involved. Where do we go from here? Because we have promised town meeting that we're gonna use the building as much as we possibly can. So I would like to see a report similar to that report, but much different, with what are we doing, what are the dates, when are we gonna move forward with using the rest of that property? That's the conversation that I thought we were gonna start tonight, and that's the conversation I think we need to have. Because we do keep telling town meeting we're gonna do more, but we're not doing more.
I'll say that through my work with this project, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from our director, Cara, who has programs and projects, and every room in that building is licensed out. And the action that goes on at that property is pretty substantial. I'd urge all the board members to meet with her and just go over what the programs and the projects that she's got going on entail. It was eye-opening to me, and I'll leave it at that. Anything else from the board? No. Okay, Joe, let's move to the parking spots in Harwich Center, please.
Sure. This topic, as I understand it, came out from, we know one of the property owners on Main Street is asking about parking spaces. So I asked the board for some time to look at, first, the requirements of the grant that we got that impacted upon Harwich Center, certainly from Bank to Sisson, but also as far as Oak to Parallel. So the town received a grant in 2021 in the amount of $142,021 to make improvements to painted curb bump outs, expanded sidewalk zones, improved crosswalks, and traffic calming measures to better protect pedestrians. So that grant covered the full cost of the work that was done, both the engineering, design, and then installation of those items, as well as some planters, et cetera. I was required as town administrator to send a report to the Mass Department of Transportation at the end of that fiscal year, certifying that the projects were done and that the purposes such as better protections for pedestrians and traffic calming measures took place. So if we're going to, well, the word is, if we're going to re-engineer the center, we need to re-engineer the center. We don't have funds available yet, but there are funds in the various beautification projects and sidewalk projects that may be contemplated for that purpose. But we can't do anything yet without the engineering and design. We also may not be able to do anything until we go back to Mass DOT, because the work that was done with build-outs to be temporary until the town could make it permanent.
So I'm a little confused by that. And I remember the whole process. I remember all the public meetings. I remember the meetings afterwards, the stakeholder meetings afterwards, and where we were going to come back with something. And I certainly appreciate, with all the conversation we've had tonight about priorities, we can't keep piling things on. But we do have money in funds. And the very first step of this is to do a survey to see if it's even possible. And then the engineering to see if it's even possible width-wise. And then going back to the state, if you say we have to, then I will take your word for it, unless one of us gets a hold of them and they say we don't, because we have already removed the Jersey barriers. We've already removed the planters. We've already completely changed that project from what it was, and we had a fairly in-depth conversation about doing so. The only criticism that I probably still have is people hate the red and wish we went to green. But even that's getting faded to the point now where we're gonna have to do something about that. Or I would say that the bulk of the project doesn't actually even exist anymore, with the exception of the parking on the one side of the street, which serves those businesses very well. So the ask here is, for the sake of the building in Harwich Center and the businesses that occupy that space, is a very simple cut-in with 2 parking spots. And again, I don't want to be the guy that puts a time frame on this, but certainly DPW director could weigh in on what it would take him to get a survey, and the town administrator can certainly weigh in on whether or not the sidewalk funds is an appropriate funding source for that, and at least put that project on somebody's radar. We've been asked, and this goes back 2 years, 2.5 years now, I believe. This goes at least 2 of the businesses on the opposite side of the road that benefited, and then the owners of said building on that side have at least met with 2 select board members and been fairly public about us doing something. So I don't know if we want to bring this back, which seems to be a trend too, but do we want to put this at least in the DPW director's hands, so that if we don't own the property, it's kind of a non-issue? But if there's room there and somebody could look at it and say, yes, it's possible and you'll have to do this step, I think that's an exercise worth doing. Or, no, you're crazy and you're never gonna have it, and then we never have to have the conversation again. But I would support, at very least, having the DPW director look at this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To support what Michael was saying, it is kind of critical to the discussion, because it may be a non-starter, to know that's a pretty extensive depth for a sidewalk. And my gut feeling is that there's part of it that's the road layout that's ours, and part of it that's the buildings. But there's no way of knowing that until somebody goes out and surveys it and decides which is which, unless it's all ours, which I kind of doubt.
Joe?
I wasn't going to be responding to that.
Okay. You had your hand up about...
No, I understand, yeah. I would object to the board going over, or around me to a department head. This is a Chapter 90 project. This is Department of Transportation. I've worked with staff, and I continue to work with staff on that matter. My concern remains, and I believe it remains valid. The town went through an arduous process back in 2021 to secure nearly $150,000 in engineering, construction, and everything else. If the barriers and the planters were removed permanently, we're in violation of that grant. I can talk to the DPW director to find out if those items were removed permanently. But in the certification that the board adopted back in 2021, and to the color schemes that are there, those are temporary bump outs that the town intimated the town may make permanent. So we should repaint them, but if you want to go this route, I would urge the board that if we're talking about 2 parking spaces in Harwich Center, there's any number of additional solutions we can come up with that aren't just cut into the roadway, which may prove to be very difficult.
And nobody said, I'm not sure where you got it, I didn't say go around the town administrator. My directive would be, or my ask would be for the board to direct the town administrator to talk to the DPW director. And then I would implore you to look up all the old records, because we've had this conversation over the last 3 years, many, many, many times. And the decision was made, I believe, in a public meeting to remove the Jersey barriers and whatnot. So whatever the trouble we're gonna get in, if we have to put them back, then so be it. But this isn't a beginning of a conversation. As far as I'm concerned, this is putting a conversation back on the table that should be. And I would love to hear your suggestions on other options besides cutting into a sidewalk. So I would ask the chair, and again, this conversation or ask has been on the agenda and has been discussed many, many, many times. So if you have a better idea, I would love to hear it. If the DPW director has a better idea, I would love to hear it. Because if we don't have to get into removing bricks and curbs, great. I'm not sure, other than parking on the sidewalk at that location, because the idea is to get them some delivery or quick pickup parking in front of their building. Given the house lift next door and the park on the other side of it, I'm not sure what else would work. But Joe, I would love to hear your idea, and not tonight, but I would ask the chair to put it back on so we can look at past documents and past conversations. Instead of continuing to tell the business owner, we'll look at it, we'll look at it, we'll look at it.
Thank you, Michael. Board?
I would just say, as far as seeing the documents related to the grant agreement, because if it was put in there temporarily for whether the barriers or the painting on the pavement, for the town to evaluate the permanency of it, well, perhaps that's what we're saying, is that it's not going to be permanent. So I'd love to see whatever the grant agreement was, and to what extent we were obligated to keep it in place.
And I wouldn't object to that. The concern is the focus on merely 2 spaces within the center. For me, I understand the need of those business owners and all of that, but I think it's fair to put everyone on notice that we would be revisiting the entire project. That's not a deal breaker, but it wouldn't be simply for 2 spaces in Harwich Center. It would have to be a reevaluation of the entire center. And to that end, we're looking to see if there are other grants available. Because we did go the temporary route, we could do an analysis of whether we want to go temporary to permanent or a completely different direction. My concern is simply the focus on the 2 spaces on that one side.
Pete, are you saying you'd like to get that grant agreement sent to you?
I'd love to see, yeah, what the town agreed to back in 2021.
And I would as well, if you would send that to the board, Joe.
And I would say in a parallel, an evaluation could be done on the area, the 2 parking spots have been alluded to. I think I know what we're talking about, but I'm not positive, so my point is that it can happen in parallel. We don't need to wait for that grant agreement discussion to take place. We can bring it all together at one meeting. Because I guess, and I'm sorry to prolong this, I want to go home too, but if we find out that we don't have any land there for, under our jurisdiction, then that conversation piece ends, and then we just focus on the grant piece.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a secret, it's the Masonic Lodge that's in front of.
Right.
Secret's out now.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about it already.
Anything else on that topic? The board? No, okay. Nice easy layup here, Joe, meeting with town Chatham, Monomoy region.
Yeah, so the meeting for Town of Harwich, Town of Chatham, and officials from Monomoy Regional School District, the subgroup, so to speak, is set for, I believe it's Wednesday, October 2nd. However, the town at present did not have the services of a finance director, so right now it's just your chair and myself. In the same vein that you've talked about everything tonight, it is something that I've reached out to Mr. Kinshirf. It would be helpful to have a finance person there as well. However, everyone agreed, and believe it or not, that was the earliest date we could get when we started reaching out in early August, is October 2nd, so, but it's on the calendar.
It's on the calendar. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the board on that?
Other than a report back.
Of course. All right, moving on to item H, discussion and vote on a fee waiver request from Outermost Land Survey, Inc. Joe, you want to take this? I think we have Mike Locke on the,
I would.
do you want to go right to Mike?
Yeah, this is a request that has to go to the board.
Excellent. Hi, Mike.
Hey, everybody, thanks for the time. Matt, may I share my screen, please?
Who's Mike Locke? Oh, you mean Michael?
Michael Locke.
Oh, that guy, okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Can you see the map there?
You can.
Great. Thanks for your time. I'm Michael Locke, Executive Director of the Harwich Conservation Trust. The property that we're focused on is outlined in blue, 2 parcels, total of about 10.3 acres, 7 acres in Harwich, another 3.3 acres in Brewster. You see it located west of Hinckley's Pond. This property was approved at this year's town meeting for $100,000 in Community Preservation Act open space funding for preservation to protect the public water supply and wildlife habitat corridor connecting over 1,000 acres across the towns of Harwich and Brewster. Outermost Land Survey has been contracted by Harwich Conservation Trust to complete the approval not required A&R plan for the approximately 10.3 acre property. And the A&R plan will result in approximately the 3.3 acre lot being conveyed out to Brewster Conservation Trust and the 7 acre lot retained by Harwich Conservation Trust, subject to conservation restriction held by the Town of Harwich Conservation Commission per the May 2024 town meeting CPA funding vote. So in support of this town, Harwich Conservation Trust Land and Water Supply Protection Partnership, we ask if the select board can please waive the planning department fee for filing the A&R plan.
Thank you, Michael. Board? I'd look either for a motion or a discussion first. Michael?
So, Michael, when you purchased this property and you came to us, was this process not anticipated? Or did this process arrive after the purchase?
No, this process was anticipated. The $100,000 in Community Preservation Act open space funding from Town of Harwich is devoted 7 acres in Harwich. That was always part of the town meeting vote, and it was anticipated to convey out the 3.3 acres in Brewster to our fellow land trust, Brewster Conservation Trust.
Yeah, so you know how I feel about fee waivers, I'm sure, if you watch our meetings. I mean, this is a real cost to the town of Harwich, therefore I'm generally against these. And I just wonder why we didn't think to ask CPC for the administrative funds, for their administrative funds, or a portion of at least, to do this, and why we're coming back to the town of Harwich now.
Thanks for that question. That's something that I'll be mindful of in the future. I'm sorry I didn't think of that ahead of time. I understand your position.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for all you do to protect our environment. I do appreciate it. I just really don't support fee waivers.
I understand.
Don?
Well, this is a well-known dance, so I'm going to actually make a motion that we waive the fee. Someone's going to second it, I hope, and then it'll get voted down with me voting for it. But I'm making that motion.
Thank you for the motion, Don. Is there a second?
I'll second for the purpose of more discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Pikarski. Is there any more discussion? No more discussion, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
But going a little bit further, Michael, it seems to me, I'm sorry, the other Michael, you didn't win.
He's right there.
Well, he's over here, too. He's omnipresent. In having that discussion about affordable housing that we had a few weeks, probably a month ago now, and it came to pass, we were having a smaller discussion within that meeting relative to the person who's trying to rebuild the West Harwich schoolhouse. I would love to have an agenda item where we take a deeper dive into what we're doing and how we're doing it, especially for small things that are socially important to us, whether that's open space, I don't know, or affordable housing. Putting people into a burden where they have to make the application fees out and do all kinds of gyrations and get everything done without any clue about whether there's a prospect of them getting approved at the end seems to me to be egregious, and it seems like we're shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to especially affordable housing, where small developers like him or small affordable housing providers really aren't in a position to lay out that kind of cash if they don't have some sort of assurance that it's going to lead anywhere. So I'd love to have that kind of discussion, as well as what the myriad of things that they have to do to jump through hoops and over barriers.
I agree on that one.
Thank you. Vote was 3-1, not in favor. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everyone. Look forward to future partnerships. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to item I. We'll wait for the town administrator to come back.
This is pretty standard.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, then let's open the discussion.
And I would start, and I would just start to the board. It can reiterate to the town administrator, but we've never done anything like this before. So it seems that there's a disconnect, you know, on the police report or fire report, or one of the reports based on the port. The town went in that night based on a complaint, which I think all the complaints that night were anonymous, and they had the understanding that the port had 84, the occupancy of 84, when in fact the owner of the restaurant, or one of the owners of the restaurant, produced a document stating, a privately done document stating that the capacity was 360. It's quite a delta there. And I would argue that our Board of Health, our building commissioner, our town administrator, and this board needs to get a handle on what people's actual occupancies are. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I agree that their occupancy is 360, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I agree that the next one we're about to take up, their occupancy, the fire department went in saying that it was 39. So there's such a disconnect in what we think they are and what both restaurants were able to produce for documentation stating that it's different. And neither had come back to us, and I don't want to say neither, I don't recall them coming back to us and saying, no, our occupancy is this, it's not that. So I think the town first, before we start issuing punishments or having the town administrator do hearings, should get a handle on these reports that the individual restaurants had done and on every other one in town, so that when our fire department and police department go, they actually have an understanding of what's there. There's some other things I could pick apart in the way heads were counted, but I don't think that we need to get into that. But I would absolutely not support having a hearing with these two establishments for a violation when I don't believe the town was clear when they went in there what the occupancies actually were. So I'll leave it at that. We can only take one at a time, but I'm speaking on both I and J at this point.
Thank you, Michael. Any other board members?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is all like getting glommed together because there's been a number of different incidences and everything, but I would say that one thing that we really do want to let all the license holders know is that upon demand, we need to be able to gain access to every single licensed facility if we request that. They can't just close the door and lock it on somebody. So that's a whole separate issue than whether there was physically something more than what there should have been, but it's not an option because the license isn't a mandatory issuance. The license is a privilege, and therefore you have to abide by certain rules and regulations, and one of them is if the fire department or the police department comes and asks for access, they have to be granted access. And I think we need to tell all of our licensees that that's the deal.
Thank you, Don. Pete?
My only point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to your point, Michael, it appears to me that on the actual license, it indicates the capacity of the establishment. Right in the document itself, so I'm not sure where the uncertainty is as far as the max capacity.
What is the licensing, what is it capacity, Pete, without me finding the document real quick? What is the capacity?
Port's 84.
Port says 84.
Right.
That is not their occupancy, and that's not what the police and
States-
fire report said. They had an independent company come in and do occupancy. What the 89 is, or 84 is the number of seats. So I believe we, the town, have the disconnect on what's allowed in the building versus seats. Now, if any one of them had just put another 50 seats and some tables in there, that's a clear violation. But this is just occupancy of the building, which is very different than seats.
Yeah, and the term on here is actually capacity is 84. So, to me, that indicates the amount of people that are allowed in the building. Now, I'm happy to extend this and try to seek clarity when it comes to occupancy. To your point, I'm certainly not going to rely on the business owner's private assessment of 300 and odd people in that building. But it is quite the delta from 84. So I'm happy to hold off on this, these two agenda items for the time being, and seek clarity from the town, the various departments within town.
And then if I can, through you, Mr. Chair.
Michael?
I believe the town administrator has already initiated staff to try and get to the bottom of capacity versus tables and chairs.
It's getting all choked up.
So, I'm not speaking to items I or J in case you remand them to me as the hearing officer. I was also distracted. Chief, were you looking to make a comment? All right, thank you. While the chief comes up, I will say that, yes, several weeks ago, if not close to a month or so, I had asked staff in preparation for the next round of licenses, first the annual and then the seasonal, for us to get into that matter. So, yes, it is under review by staff and had been prior, I think, to the alleged violations.
Thank you. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening. Kevin Considine, Police Chief. I know we're not technically on J yet, but this is kind of intermingled I and J. There is an item on J that is non-capacity related.
Yeah, I'm only taking up the
Okay.
one, and I did say that.
Thank you.
For now, anyway.
Thank you.
Don?
Not to be contentious about this, but when we, through you, Mr. Chair, capacity is not totally our jurisdiction. There's safety that the fire department issues numbers on, and the Board of Health, when somebody actually requests to open up a restaurant, assesses what the capacity of the Title V system is, and neither of those is under our jurisdiction, really, for the crowd safety, for the fire department, or for the purposes of septic. So, I mean, there is a lid that we can't go beyond. But you're right, I think it might be nice to have everybody in the same room at the same time.
Yeah, I think we need, as the licensing authority, need to wrap our head around what it all actually means, and then what studies we're going to allow and what we're not going to allow, and what is in our purview and what is not, because I want to make sure everyone's getting held to the same standard too, based on toilets, Don, to your restrooms, to your conversation. There's a lot to this. We've talked about this over the years, but we've never actually gotten to a number. And I think it's time now with these two instances to get to a number.
But at the base of all of this, I think we could all agree that that number is not established by the establishment, it's established by us.
And that was one of my questions, is does the town recognize outside experts to determine capacity? So I know we have Dave LeBlanc, our fire chief, on TV here. So Dave, do you want to say anything? You're muted, Dave. Hold on, Dave. We'll get you. He's still muted. So while he works on getting unmuted, I'll just say that this was probably one of the most confusing things I've ever read. You know, there's 360 people in there, capacity is 84 at the port, yet the condition inside was safe and there was no need to remove any patrons. I think, to Pete's point, getting clarity on this whole thing that we call capacity should happen sooner rather than later. So why don't we take I right now, discussion and possible vote, to appoint the town administrator as a hearing officer, public hearing for alleged liquor license violation that occurred August 3rd, 2024 at the Port Restaurant. Can I get a motion on that? So
I'd say, if I may,
Yeah,
take
please.
no action.
Take no action?
We don't have to do anything.
How's the board feel?
For which item?
For just item
Aye.
I, sorry, for
Yeah.
item I.
If we're not gonna get a positive motion on that action, then we take no action.
Understood, okay. So we're gonna move right over I.
All right, so if I get to J, if I may.
Please.
J, I would say, on the hearing officer on the overcrowding, the two overcrowding issues